It is said one of the highlights of the debate the Republican presidential candidates had the other night was when Ted Cruz responded to a question about illegal immigration to this country, saying that folks in media aren't concerned, but if illegal immigrants were coming here and taking the journalism jobs, that those folks in media they'd be having a fit at the moment. We've said it before on this program. Most of the people who are welcoming of refugees coming here from other parts of the world and say that we all need to be or speak in the royal we and say we are better people than that, and they're welcoming of illegal immigrants, most of them live in neighborhoods where they don't have to see these people. They don't have to deal with these people other than maybe running into them at the grocery store now and then or getting run into them by at an intersection. Aside from that, though, the people who are the friendliest often have the least to do with this. Or they are apparatchiks for the Democrat Party, and they're just looking at this as an opportunity to add tens of thousands of more voters to the local voting rolls so that they can finally try to wrest some political power back. 8 minutes after. Well, if you had better ideas, you might be able to do it that way, but clearly you don't. 8 minutes after 9 o'clock, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. 39 at the moment. Hopefully we're going to be warming up a bit as we move through the day. I have this from Ted Cruz speaking yesterday on Fox. He's chatting with Sean Hannity on his program. And there was a follow-up question or two about Cruz's remarks from the night before at the debate. Cruz says that many of his fellow Republicans, unfortunately, whether they come right out and say it or not, are for amnesty.
My reaction as I was listening to that, I was just getting angrier and angrier. Look, there is nothing compassionate about a bunch of politicians saying, I'm so compassionate, I'm going to give away your job. Because that's what they're saying. None of them are losing their job, but they're happy to tell working men and women across this country that your job can be taken away by people coming here illegally.
Now, one of the other highlights of that debate, because you've got John Kasich and Jeb Bush, who are, of course, promoting amnesty and illegal immigration. The folks on Wall Street who back their campaigns and write the large checks for all of the campaign commercials and all of the buses and everything else that they have and the bumper stickers, those people are out there, they're looking for cheap labor. So Kasich and Bush are the candidates of Wall Street. You could say that people like Ted Cruz, he's the candidate of Main Street. And then you've got Donald Trump, even though he's a very, very wealthy man, and even though some people have said, well, you know, in some of the building projects that he's been involved in, probably there were illegal aliens who were working on those. But Trump cited what happened under President Eisenhower 61 years ago, 1954. President Eisenhower put together a plan to remove, and what they did is they said they were forcibly going to remove people who were here in this country illegally. Just the threat of that caused most of them to leave. In other words, just the threat of saying there's going to be a crackdown, people will get up and say, you know what, I don't want to have to go through this. I'm going to go back to Juarez. Trump mentioned that while he was on the air, got some good applause out of that particular. Now, because of political correctness, you could not call it what they called it during the Eisenhower administration. We'll leave it at that. So here's Trump speaking last night with Bill O'Reilly on the O'Reilly Factor on Fox News Channel. And O'Reilly is trying to play devil's advocate, saying he doesn't think that parts of Trump's plan would ever work.
Do you remember when you said about the anchor babies that there's nothing you can do about it? And I said, yes, there is. And I was right about it. And frankly, all we need is a simple, well, yes, I was. You don't need a new amendment. All we have to do is go back to Congress and have a rather routine. It's been fully vetted now, Bill. I was right on the anchor babies.
The courts have ruled twice against the anchor baby stuff. You'd have to get a constitutional amendment passed to overturn that. You might be able to do it.
Bill,
you might be able to do it, but you just couldn't.
You don't have to do a constitutional amendment.
This goes around and around.
You need an act of Congress.
Okay,
I'm telling you, you need an act of Congress. Everybody thought you needed a constitutional amendment.
You could change the law.
You don't need that.
You could change the law,
you don't
absolutely,
need that.
But you couldn't do it retroactively. Now, who do you think?
You don't need a constitutional amendment.
All right, okay.
I was reading a column the other day. It might have been in Washington Times or Washington Examiner. The author was Kermit Roosevelt. Now, his family is well known in this country. Two of his relatives happen to be presidents. He is a law professor, distinguished law professor, they call him, at some college in Pennsylvania. And Kermit Roosevelt said, look, birthright citizenship is granted by those big three middle amendments. And when those were passed, you know, that pretty much enshrined birthright citizenship. So a child, an anchor baby that is born here, even though the intent is just to get mom and dad a foothold in this country, we can't stop that. I found that ironic, considering that his cousin, when World War II broke out, gathered up all of the people of Japanese ancestry living on the West Coast and herded them into camps. Now, those people could have challenged that in court, and probably the court would have dragged its feet in about 1945 and finally came out with a ruling and said, you're right, President Roosevelt does not have the authority, you can all go home. Oh, by the way, the war's over. So the irony in that one Roosevelt is criticizing people who would like to remove this birthright citizenship from people who are coming here, and an anchor baby is just simply running a scam to take advantage of that, the way the Constitution or the law is written. Trump is simply saying, we do an act of Congress, then we'll fight it out in court. Now, the fight in court could take a long time. But in the meantime, Trump would likely frighten a lot of people into packing up and leaving this country. And once that's done, my guess at this point is, you could also send people home, and if they want to take their children along with them, that's fine. The children could always come back as adults. But at least you clear up 2/3 of the problem that way for the long term. I think Trump would go ahead with this as president. Yes, it would be challenged in court. Likely, a court might even rule quite quickly and say no, because, Anthony Kennedy, if he's still going to be on the bench, and certainly Sonia Sotomayor, she's going to rule from her own personal interest. And Kagan probably would think she'd have a girlfriend who could come here from another country. So, they would all be ruling, and the liberals on the court in that sense. But I think what you would see in the long run, Trump might defy the court. Now, a couple of things would happen in that situation. You could probably have people who would say, well, if he's going to do this, the Supreme Court could not impeach the president. That would have to happen over in you'd have to have a trial in the Senate after a vote in the House. And if you're going to have, by the way, come 2017, Republican control of both the House and the Senate, you would not see a lot of people there eager because they would know how popular this is among the American voters. Trump would simply do what Andrew Jackson did. Andrew Jackson, when he was told, hey, you can't move those Cherokee Indians west, Jackson said, stop me. That literally could be what we have coming. It's going to be a dicey situation. But Trump is saying people have had enough, and we're talking about national survival here. 9:14, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and NewsRadio1310.com. Over at the Daily Caller, columnist Ann Coulter is saying one candidate has not been asked the tough questions on this, and his name is Marco Rubio. Someone needs to tell Marco she's responding to the fact that he keeps saying that he's looking to the future. Are people really going to buy into that? America's best days are ahead. Yes, and I see sunshine, and I see a chicken in every pot. Yeah, it makes you feel good. It's like wetting your pants in a dark suit. Warm feeling all over, but nobody notices. So here's Rubio giving those plaudits and just, bromides to people instead of anything really serious. And she says, tell them that every election is about the future, not just this one. She said it was also the slogan for every high school graduation and prom, circa 1999. We have now had, she writes, the fourth straight Republican debate in which Rubio was not asked one question about his single legislative accomplishment, passing amnesty in the U.S. Senate. So before you all get on the Rubio band, yeah, but gosh, he's pretty, and he's quick on his feet, and he says the sun is going to shine. Oh, I like sunshine. I like pretty people. I like people quick on their feet. Don't be a Democrat. Use your noggin if you're a Republican or a conservative voter. That's why you differ from them. You're not sold on a bunch of promises of a free lunch. We have a caller with us. You're up next. You're on the air with Bill Colley on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and NewsRadio1310.com. And what's on your mind?
Well, Bill, the illegal immigrants of 61 years ago versus the illegal immigrants of today is this. The illegal immigrants of today believe they are entitled to be here.
The Reconquista is what they call it.
Yeah, they don't think they act like they've got more rights. Well, they're treated like with more rights than the actual citizen has. And you're dead on right about Marco Rubio. They compare his amnesty plan to that of Obama's, and while I agree he's still better than Hillary. My dog would be better than Hillary, but while we're still thinning this stuff out, we don't have to let the news media tell us that's who we need to.
Right.
And that's what's happening. We're being told how to think. They're always pushing him forward.
That struck me yesterday because I had a clip from Bobby Jindal, who really was the shining star in the pre-debate, the early debate with they call it the kids' table. And Jindal has been polling, way behind in you wonder why Republican voters, but then I'll hear Republican voters say, well, he's so dry and he's so dull. You know where that came from? Many, many years ago, it might have been 2009, he gave the Republican response to the State of the Union, and people said it was a little dry because he was standing in a room at the State House in Louisiana and before an old staircase and giving the reply, and they said, oh, he sounds like your third grade teacher. That's the media narrative. And even among conservatives and Republicans, they bought it and they still say, oh, he's just too dry. No, he's not. He had one moment where it was claimed he was dry, and now even our own voters don't have the critical thinking skills to say, you know what this guy's talking about is spot on.
Well, it's an uphill battle for sure. We're just a bunch of guppies in a fishbowl being fed by the media.
Yeah. I thank you much for the call, sir. Great call. In fact, if you'd like to reach our program today, try to top that one, 736-0300, 736-0300. Michael Barone, you want to talk about a prolific writer. Michael Barone has a column today at Washington Examiner, and he has a column today over at the Wall Street Journal. And he says that he's not so sure that Rubio will survive all of this scrutiny. He says he was also lucky not to be called on or smart enough not to volunteer in the argument between Trump and Bush about immigration or in response to Ted Cruz's denunciation of the Rubio-supported sugar subsidy program. That luck may not hold out the next time. So he's basically seconding exactly what Ann Coulter was talking about. 18 minutes after 9 o'clock, you're up next. You're on the air with Bill Colley on News Radio 1310 KLIX.
Yeah, Bill, maybe you can clarify something for me. To the top of the hour, apparently a Muslim group said they were going to turn Norway, and remember that Sweden is the rape capital of the world because of Muslim men, but some Muslim group is going to turn Norway into Lebanon. Now, I don't know what quite that means, but I'll find out. But you see, these kinds of threats that are happening in Europe at this point, they fully intend, and they are well on their way to doing this to us.
Well, and the thing is, there's no Winston Churchill anymore who will go to Norway's defense.
No.
No one on the world stage the only guy who perhaps has that kind of a muscle, Vladimir Putin, but he wouldn't probably try to save Norway. I thank you much for the telephone call, sir. Good hearing from you, and we've got a short break coming up. More on the program. Hey, speaking of the media, new study out from the Brookings Institution. If you like your local newspaper, well, got bad news for you. It's not going to be around much longer. Some of us probably would like to say, good riddance.